Why did you and your last partner break up? Story 1. I had trust issues with people, to the point where I would make up scenarios about them, painting people like my ex in a bad light. So I drove myself crazy thinking she was some mastermind trying to fool me, when in reality, it was all in my head. I broke up with her, leaving us both broken-hearted and confused. Story 2. Incredibly low effort and energy individual who relied on me leading in every sphere of life. She received far, far more than she ever gave, and I found the thought of spending a weekend with her exhausting after the honeymoon period ended, starting taking things for granted and acting entitled after a couple of months and will always assume the worst. She also lacked family values. She made for a fun dating partner for first few months, but I could see that I could never consider her as a long-term partner, and hence ended things despite her being a bombshell Latina with green eyes. Story 3. She believed that sex outside of marriage was a sin unless it was forced on her, and she was very horny. Giving consent for aggressive interaction would make it a sin again, so she would pretend that she didn't want sex, then get very angry because I didn't force myself on her. I didn't want to do anything that could be used to put me in prison in the future. She was also married and separated and didn't tell me. Her husband was a violent, jealous sociopath. So, we had communication issues. Story 4. He was a neglectful father, and I got tired of him ignoring our son. He was, still is, a compulsive liar, and I eventually decided my son and I were better off on our own than living with him. It's been 3 years, and I'm so much happier. Our son is thriving, and my ex is still the same asshole he was before we split, so we have zero regrets. Story 5. She couldn't handle distances, I guess. I was diagnosed Burkitt lymphoma and had chemotherapy. She only visited me once, and when she called me after my cures are over, yes, we broke up by phone, she said, "I didn't want to break up with you during the treatment." Well, thank you. Story 6, communications issues. And she was depressed and had a medical issue, and it was hard to handle for both of us. I could cheer her up sometimes, but then she'd go back to staying up all night, watching TV, and just not being happy. I tried hard to get her to go to therapy, to get help, but it wasn't working. She started doing a little better for a while. We started doing better. We went on a cruise. She asked when I was going to propose to her, when I was going to marry her. I said I needed time. Wasn't sure when, but needed more time. That was the wrong thing to say. We got back from the cruise and it was over. Neither one of us knew it at the time. She fell back into depression and I tried helping, but we just grew more distant. Until we got in a bad argument. Honestly, that was my fault. But it was a long time coming. That ended it. She moved out and moved states. Story 7. Last long-term relationship before my wife. She was interested in blowing hillbilly factory rats while I was burying my best friend's dead baby, and guilt tripped me about how lonely she was, and instead of vomiting every day forever, we split. Last dating relationship before my wife, I actually don't remember. I think it had something to do with a difference in interest levels. I was ready to be serious, and she was ready to have fun, but she also might have met someone else. The ones which in hindsight were meaningless all run together. Story 8. I was a confused, horny high schooler in a Christian family that believed being gay is a sin, and she was bisexual. She didn't feel comfortable telling me, obviously, so she broke it off by telling me she just wasn't ready for a relationship. I only found out the real reason a few months later because of a mutual friend, which actually helped me to realize that I needed to start figuring shit out and reevaluate my worldview. Story 9. I was the messy partner in the relationship, and it caused him to lose attraction to me. I wish he would have communicated when it started being a problem for him, but he waited nearly a year until I begged him to tell me what was wrong. By that point, it was too late, and he didn't think it could be fixed, but was still shocked when I ended things. Story 10. Okay, so where do I even begin? Okay, first off, I'm married. My wife and I have an open, polyamorous relationship. I had a girlfriend who was also married. When girlfriend and her husband parted ways, she moved in with another boyfriend. She had 3 boyfriend total. Well, the boyfriend that she moved in with convinced her that the 2 of them should now be monogamous. And just like that, she said, "We can't do this anymore." We hugged and went separate ways. Story 11. She stole from Walmart when I was with her, and I didn't realize she did so until we left the store, and she then made a big joke about it. I didn't find it funny that she put my career and everything I worked hard for in jeopardy over a $1.15 pair of Friends-themed pajamas. Loss prevention is no joke. Also guilty by association kind of deal. She then tried to defend herself, saying, her family and friends steal from Walmart all the time. I had a huge problem with her behavior. We broke it off a week later. Story 12. I realized the only reason I was staying in the relationship was because for 4 years, she kept telling me I couldn't break up with her because she struggled with breakups and rejection. I realized that being afraid of hurting someone wasn't a good reason to stay in a relationship that wasn't working. I also realized that whenever there was conflict, we always compromised in her favor, because I usually didn't feel like I could talk about what I wanted, because she constantly talked about how hard conflict was for her. When I did manage to stand up for myself, I usually ended up taking it back and trying to console her. Eventually, I realized I didn't want to feel like that, and had someone deliver a breakup letter when I was on a work trip 14 hours away. Since I didn't think I could stick with it if I did it in person, I'd been fantasizing about breaking up for over 3 years. Story 13. I have no idea, and that sucks. Just stopped working after 2 years. We tried to make it work, we talked about what was happening, we didn't know what to do. One day, she came over to mine. I asked her what's going on, we talked, and she ended up breaking up with me. We still have to see each other at college, have the same friends, and are even neighbors. It's scary and has been really hard to move on because I can't give a solid reason for why it ended after 2 absolutely amazing years. And weirdly, now that we have broken up, we seem to click again just as friends now. Story 14. He told me that once I moved in with him, I was to deposit my paycheck into his account, and he would give me an allowance. He is 20 years older than me, and at the time, I was too young to see what a predatory relationship I was in. I was pregnant and felt obligated to marry him because everyone around me kept telling me I couldn't do it on my own. I found out he cheated on me, and the next day learned we were having a girl. He didn't go to the doctor with me, but when I called him after we discussed his infidelity, he said, "That's how I am. You just need to deal with it." I realized that I didn't want to raise a daughter in an environment where this was the appropriate way to treat a person, so I dealt with it and dumped him. That was 18 years ago, and now my daughter is strong-willed and outspoken, just as she should be. He, unfortunately, is still a piece of shit. Story 15. She had numerous affairs, constantly tore me down, and attempted to gaslight me into thinking all the problems were my fault. I was the only one putting any effort at all into the relationship. Eventually, I'd had enough and kicked the bitch out of my life as much as I could. For the sake of my kids, I remain civil towards her. 4.5 years until my youngest is 18 and I can block her number and never have to talk to her again. Story 16. We didn't give each other enough space, and we had circular arguments that never solved anything. He still had insecurities from his last relationship and kept accusing me in very gaslighting ways about things, and over time it built resentment. Example, I went to the movies by myself on my birthday. When I got to his place, he said, "Dressed awfully nice to go to a movie by yourself." When I said that I dress nice for myself all the time, he then asked why I wanted to take a shower since I got so dressed up LOL, I was caught in the rain and drenched. We argued and he admitted he thought I went on a date with another man, would do things like that. And it made me feel so untrusted and even made me question my own actions. If you are going to make someone feel bad for your ex's behavior, you aren't ready for a relationship. Story 17. He was a bum taking advantage of me. Acted like a child and didn't want to do anything. Spent all my money and ran my credit cards up to the max. Had no job for 3 years while I paid for everything, working 3 jobs to just make ends meet. Very controlling and jealous. Shocked me when he didn't want me hanging out with my own dad because he was a guy. He never cleaned nor cooked. All he did was smoke weed all day until I got home to make him dinner. I finally opened my eyes and left, paid off all my debt, and now in a way better relationship where it's more 50-50ths and matured. Story 18. I outgrew her. We were together for 13 years, married for 3. I learned to manage my emotions, took responsibility for my actions, and worked toward bettering my life. She didn't. Then she cheated on me. But I was so horribly depressed from a series of unrelated traumatic events surrounding COVID that I didn't care. We tried couples counseling, but that only confirmed how immature she was. Then she tried to go full scorched earth and falsely accused me of essaying her teenage sister, who lived in a different state and who I had only seen like 3 times in my entire life. Wild accusations during the divorce. It was messy, but she needed to brand me as the villain to justify the pain of the breakup. I lost a lot of friends who believed her and never spoke to me again, but the ones that did realized she was lying. It changed me to be betrayed like that. Really colored my opinion of relationships, but after years of therapy, I'm happier, healthier, wealthier, and more fulfilled than ever. Story 19. We moved to a new state, and she didn't like it, so she stole a bunch of shit from me. Then dipped out on a rental, which we are both on, causing me to pay for both spots, and now can't afford, and she racked up my credit cards. Now I'm $30,000 in debt and need to claim bankruptcy, and it's super hard to find a roommate, so I may need to live in my car in a few months in Southern FL. Sorry it's a vent, but fuck that shit. Story 20. She lied to me for 7 years. Never was truly open and honest with me. Wasn't good at communicating with me, even though I constantly went out of my way to communicate with her. She never meant any of the nice things she said to me. It was always just things I wanted to hear. It took me a while to realize it. Then I started to see all the red flags I ignored. I knew something wasn't right, but my heart kept telling my brain not to worry about it. Then she must have realized I snapped out of it, and before I could break it off, she beat me to the punch and literally just disappeared from my life. Haven't heard from her since. No closure, no goodbye, no sorry, just gone. Life is truly just the writing on the wall. Story 21. I was an alcoholic, pack-per-day smoker, and had major emotional problems. She was flaky, inattentive, and wasn't always nice to me. Her own sister used to tell her how bitchy she was to me. She would manipulate me into staying together by crying every time we almost broke up and saying I was giving up on us. Needless to say, we both had problems. To her credit, mine were more pressing in the short term. Eventually, she realized I needed to sort myself out and broke up with me via an early morning text on my birthday. I still resent that. But in hindsight, we were terrible together, and the only thing that kept us going was our sex life. I'd never before had sexual chemistry like I did with her. That was the only area where we just fucking worked, full stop. I got sober, spent weeks and months alone processing my past traumas, and learned to take better care of myself. For what it's worth, she never actually gave me a reason for the breakup. I just chose to view it through the lens of my own struggles as motivation to heal and improve. To anyone who reads this, closure is overrated. You don't need someone else's input or permission to move on. Story 22. She did not listen, and there came too many cases of, you had one fucking job. Examples. Task. Stay behind me while I drive a 40-year-old motorhome on its first trip in years, 100 miles through LA freeways to its final resting place in the desert. We transition freeways, and I watch as she changes lanes from behind me into a lane that was stopped, only to disappear into the distance. I pull over after 3 miles, sweating bullets because the registration was years expired, and judging by the volume of cars that passed before she finally caught up in the same lane she pulled into unnecessarily, fell 2 miles behind me in that 3-mile stretch. On another occasion, we stopped with my nearly 80 yo mom at a bustling roadside restaurant tourist trap. Task. I asked her to wait in a patch of shade holding my dog for 2 minutes while I went inside to check if the outdoor patio on the far side of the building could accommodate the dog while we waited. It could, with a long walk around the building, and as I'm walking back through 45 seconds later, she's bringing the dog inside this food establishment. Couldn't explain the reason, and thought I was making a big deal out of nothing because I found this mortifying. Story 23. 4-month relationship. Started like a fairy tale come true, but after about a month, he started getting really resentful for some reason, accusing me of not liking him, of faking things like interest, orgasms, laughter. He refused to do anything that I planned, even if he agreed to it, because he was always just too tired. See, stoned. And every time we were supposed to actually spend time together, it was always cut short because he was always hanging out with someone else, doing something else. I never felt like a priority. Added to that fact that when we did spend time together, most of it was me walking on eggshells to not make him upset. Like, I couldn't make noises in the car when he was driving like a maniac, because I would cause an accident. Or if I said the wrong thing, he would go on a rant about how much life sucks, and there's no point to putting in effort or trying because you're just going to be let down. My breaking point came when he told me he quit his job and spent 2 weeks what I thought depressed as heck. I went to go get him some work, construction background, easy stuff, cash in hand so that he can still pay bills and eat while he figures out what to do. And the second I asked, he lost his shit at me. I mean, this man told me that I didn't like him, I trust him. Didn't I know his mother runs a company, and how dare I assume that he doesn't know how to work? He told me I hated him and his mother and everything he's ever done for me, and that he can't believe I would ever speak to him like that. And all I said was, hey, so do you have any plans for what you're going to do? I had asked because I had about 12 offers from my old crew to accept him into the fold and help him out. I was so excited, but after 3 months of being told that I didn't want to be around no matter what I did, I had to walk away. To make matter worse, he accused me of cheating on him, of lying to him about my interest and leading him on. I was so confused. Funny enough, 2 months later he was dating his new woman and post-inf about her every day. He bailed on my dad's death to go on a date with her, and posted about it. After spending a week telling me he wanted to be there, I have no idea what I meant to him if I ever did, but he threw me away the first second he got, and I've spent the last year finding myself and learning more about who I am and what I want. I'll always love him, though, in a small way. Story 24. It had just sort of naturally come to an end. She did move about an hour away, but we were doing will they won't they long before that, which almost always ends with they won't. She ended up marrying her bestie, which wasn't entirely surprising, and I'm genuinely glad for her. The end of our time together was messy and immature, because we were both messy and immature, but I wouldn't trade the couple years we spent together. We're both in, as far as I know, significantly healthier relationships now, and I'm sure have both grown a lot. I certainly have. We occasionally chat briefly on Instagram, which is nice. She's a good person that I still like as a distant friend. It was a pretty appropriate relationship to be age 20. 22 in, all said. Mostly good, some bad, nothing unspeakable. I'm glad I had the experience there to be able to be the person I am now. Story 25. Her list of priorities were work, nephew, parents, friends, and then me. She was an attorney and worked 80 hours a week, not by choice. But then her remaining free time was spent actively on the other priorities, and we'd only go out when the schedule wasn't full with everything else. Literally felt like I was dating a doctor's office. We'd schedule a date 3 weeks out, and then have to reschedule the day before because something more important popped up. We did this juggling act for 4 months. It was always a scheduling thing, and we never had any impromptu dates or simply hanging out and spending time together. That lack of physical availability was a red flag, and thinking long-term, this was not something I would be comfortable with. Then the holidays roll around. I'm out in Wyoming for a week, and she's traveling for work. Her New Year's plans are full, and we basically go a month without seeing each other. So after a month of not seeing each other, she asks me out for a date, but said, let's grab a quick drink. I called her and basically said, these bi-weekly, monthly dates solely going out for dinner or a beer or a brewery are not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for companionship, something more serious, someone who enjoys my company and willing to make time for me. So we ended things because ultimately she couldn't provide that.